All right, you are in the home stretch. We have 3 remaining sessions, 2 on finances, and then kind of a wrap-up, pull everything together, reminders type of a session. So this first one, the way we're going to break down the finances is basically in 2 big chunks. The first one's, it's all about you, your money, your spending. One of the major comments I'm going to make throughout this, and I'll say it several times, is the more you are in trouble with personal finances, the less effective you'll be in running your business. And so I want to take some time, and some of you have this so dialed in, and you're like, dude, really? You're going to talk me through how to get out of debt, that kind of thing? Yes, I am. I'm going to use some basics. It's not meant to be an all-inclusive, and if you've already got it figured out, congratulations. You're a step ahead, and it is a major step because people can see it in you. If you are desperate, if you've got to get that to happen, you will make bad decisions with the way you utilize money. You'll make bad decisions with the contracts that you lay out. You'll make bad decisions with the way that you're budgeting and forecasting. Everything that we're going to talk about in session 10 in terms of your company's finances will be influenced by how well you have this section, this session 9, in place. So again, if you've got these dialed in, congratulations. Use this as a session that maybe you can grab a few tips that you can share with one of your clients. Or maybe it's a reminder to stay on track and keep doing the things you're doing well. But if you're not, it might just be the most valuable one in terms of you being a successful business owner. So let's talk about the homework from last time. 5 benefits, not features, but benefits you provide your clients. And then purchase 1 sales book and read at least that first chapter. That was your homework from last time. Okay? So again, as always, if you've not done this, stop the video, come back to it later. But don't miss that. We're going to talk about finances, but we can't drive the finances if we're not making the sales. The discussion on contracts won't do us any good if we don't have any contracts to make. So let's get that dialed up first. All right. Zig Ziglar passed away a few years ago. Great story. If you've not read about him or heard more than a quote or 2 of his, kind of a neat story to listen to. But this is my all-time favorite of his. The chief cause of failure and unhappiness is trading what we want most for what we want now. As a business owner, this is going to be a huge focus for you. It is so easy to take the shortcut. It's so easy to jump into something saying, well, yeah, let's do that, and not considering what we want most, but just saying, boom, I need this now. And that's what personal finances are all about, is making that mistake of saying, yes, in the long term, I want to be able to save some money for a reasonable retirement. I want to be able to support some charities that I care a great deal about. I want to be able to help my kids through college. But what we want now is to go out to dinner, to buy that new car. You go down the list. So love it. It's just such a good reminder. The chief cause of failure and unhappiness is trading what we want most for what we want now. And I'm going to talk about this in the context of finances, obviously. But this quote is just as powerful in any component of wellness. This is really what your wellness coaching is all about, is helping people move past what they want now for what they truly want most. So we'll kind of call on that as we go through this. Now, the general concept, and this is a tweak. There's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. Short book. You could read it on an airplane flight. It's a story, and walks you through this little story of this guy and all the things he learns, and it's pretty powerful. There's a reason it's sold hundreds of thousands of copies, or not millions of copies, over the last 30 years. But his strategy is give 10, invest 10, live on 70. My suggestion to you is going to be to tweak that just a little bit and maybe end up somewhere between 10 and 20 on the investment side. But the goal is to be living on 70% of your income, giving 10%, Maybe that's to your church, to a charity that you care a great deal about. When we launched U.S. Corporate Wellness, this is important to us. We set up we're not wealthy enough to have a foundation. That requires practically a full-time person to run it. But there are something called charitable funds. And we utilize Vanguard for that. I think most of the major organizations offer one. Fidelity, I'm sure, TD Ameritrade maybe. But look into those if that's something that's important to you. Basically, it allows you to build a mini foundation, if you will. Again, very many in our case, but very many, not many in our case. But it just keeps the priority. So we know that every year we want to take 10% of our profits and put that into this charitable fund that we call the Spark of Hope Fund. And then we're able to take money from that and support different charities around the world. I don't know what your strategy is, but I would strongly encourage you, no matter where you're at, whether you've done this in the past or not, to start by giving 10%. What it does, because you're going to look at me and say, well, wait, what? No, you can't. We're in debt. We can't do that. Why are you starting off with this? The reason I'm starting off with this is that when you make that decision to give 10% of your earnings to charities, to people that provide you zero benefit, it changes your perspective on money. It takes us back to that quote, the Zig Ziglar's quote, what you want most is to have an impact. You consciously show, not just say, show that through your actions, no matter what your financial situation is, you're going to give 10%. It impacts your mindset, and it's really fun, frankly. And some of you are like, oh man, I'll start doing that once I make 60 grand a year, or I'll start doing that once I make 100 grand a year, or else. Really? You think it's easier to give? Let's say you're making $1 million a year. You think it's easier to give $100,000 away than it is to give $3,000 when you're making 30, or $1,000 a year when you're making 10? No, it's all in the attitude. It's all in the attitude. And I'm not here to preach to you. I just want to give you this concept that when you start with that, it changes everything else. And then if you make a goal to invest 20%, now you may be investing early on. Part of that investment may be your company. We've over the last 2 years, we've had something we're working on it's not directly tied to U.S. Corporate Wellness. It's something called ArrowBar Edge, and our investment over the last 2 years has been in helping bring that to market. Early on, some of our extra investment, we couldn't max out things like 401ks, that kind of thing, because we were trying to build U.S. Corporate Wellness. So you may, early on, be taking a portion or a significant portion of that 10 to 20% and putting it towards building your wellness company, your wellness business. That's fine. Just keep a perspective on that long term. And as we get into budgeting in session 10, be thinking, okay, I do what I need to reinvest in my company, but now that I'm got my feet under me, I need to start getting the 401k going. And by the way, you can do a self-employed 401k. Get with Fidelity. We use Fidelity for that, or get with TD Ameritrade. There are a number of different E-Trade, I think is another. Vanguard I mentioned earlier. I'm sure all of those have an option. And then live on 70%. And I know that sounds really hard, but once you get past that, it's just like exercise. Most of you probably exercise 30 to 60 minutes a day, maybe a little bit more. Once you make that a pattern, once it's who you are instead of what you do, then I don't want to ever say it's easy. Finances are always a difficult thing. But it literally is who you are. It's just what you do automatically. It's not what you do because you have to think about it. It's who you are. So 10, 20, 70. Keep that in mind. If you can do that consistently, you'll be on target. Now, how do you get there? Well, 5 easy, I shouldn't say easy, 5 basic steps, 5 simple steps. Doesn't mean they're easy. First, set and follow a budget. A lot of ways you can do that. I'll get into a few of them here during this session, but if you're struggling, if you get to the end of each month and you're having to draw on those credit cards, or if you're finding that you're going to have to eat a little bit more than probably the smartest thing to do, set a budget. And it's real simple. You just take, there are plenty of online tools, and I'll mention a couple of them, but you can literally take a piece of notebook paper and go down and write out every expense category, and then go through and say, okay, how much am I going to spend on that? How much am I going to put there? How about here? I remember I graduated from physical therapy school how many years ago? 25 years ago. And my dad, who's an accountant, makes sense here, just casually said, I was getting ready, I had my first job, I thought I was making all this money, it was going to be amazing, and he said, would you want to just sometime sit down and kind of go through kind of a typical month or budget, if you would? I was like, oh yeah, this can be awesome. I've got so much money now, I'm making this, full-time, I just got out of grad school, it's going to be awesome. So he just wrote out, he took a very good approach to it. He just wrote out all the categories and just handed me the paper and said, here, you go, just whatever you want to do, fill it out. I've kind of pre-fill out what your taxes are going to be. I've kind of pre-filled out what your Social Security is going to be. But you go through the rest of it and figure out where you want to go. Remember your student loans. I had a few, fortunately not many, and I can go into that story someday, but not here. But it was a huge eye-opener because we think we have, and I don't know if you're in this role, but we think there's plenty of money. I think it's no big deal, especially when you're fresh into something new. And once I went through and had to put a number to each of those categories, gas, rent, clothing, entertainment, eating out, groceries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was a single guy. Susanna and I were living 2 miles apart from each other. So I just had me to worry about. And it was tough. And it was an eye-opener. But it got me on the right track initially. Instead of getting 3 months in and having credit card debt already spinning out of control at 16, 18%, it got me on the right track initially. So start that way. Lay out your, if you're not, maybe you're already doing this, but if you're not, and if you're not sitting there saying, oh, I've got all kinds of money, don't need to even do that, great, congratulations. Most of us, we need to identify, and you can keep it pretty simple. Debt-free status. And we're going to talk about this, how to get out of debt, briefly. I'm going to draw on some of Dave Ramsey's information and access some of his stuff. Definitely worth a look, and I'll come back to that. But it is very powerful, the whole concept of being debt-free, because all of a sudden you're not, let's take something simple, your car. It feels great to buy a car. It's so fun. But folks, that wears off after a few months. And then you got payments for 3, 4, 5. I think there's even some 6-year lease, or not leases, but payment plans out there now. Your home, that's debatable. It depends on who you talk to. But everything besides your home, if you can make an effort to get to that debt-free status, it will change your life. You're going to sleep better at night. You have better options. You'll have more options with your business. Third, have an emergency account. And we're going to come back to this a little bit later with your business, because something that can crush you as a business owner is lack of cash flow. Well, if you've got an emergency account, and maybe it's a little bit bigger, it's not just for that broken down refrigerator or that medical expense, but it also, you put a little more in there so that when your clients don't pay you quite as quickly as you expected, you're not in big trouble. We've taken that strategy, and it probably, for us, I'm not sure it's paid off financially, because that extra money could have been earning higher return on investment if it were in the stock market or bonds or something like that. But it just makes us sleep better to know that we've got a little bit extra cash flow, so that if client doesn't pay us this month for an extra 30 days, our coaches can still get paid right away. So that's been our thought. You don't have to go that route, but certainly have at least an emergency account for you on a personal side. Number 4, capitalize on compounding for retirement. Some of you are 60, some of you are 24. I'm 50 in a couple months here. My opportunities for compounding interest aren't like they were when I was in my 20s, 30s. The earlier you start, the more that compounding kicks in, and it is literally the 7th wonder of the world. Start early, get it going. Look up some of this. Just go online and Google compounding interest impact over time. I mean, it is powerful. And then finally, model for the next generation. Many of you are going to be very successful in your businesses. You can get this rolling, and 5, 7, 12, 15 years from now, you're going to be meeting with other people and helping them start their business. Hopefully, this whole concept of financial wisdom, if you will be something that you share, that you're able to carry on, whether it's with your kids, whether it's in a mentoring relationship, etc. All right, so personal budgeting. Let's talk this through just a little bit. And by the way, everything that I tell you today, I am not a CFP, Certified Financial Planner. I'm not a Certified Public Accountant. I don't play one on TV, either one. These are meant to be practical tips that will help you go on the right step. But truly, to dial this stuff in, talk to an expert. Now, the 3 things I want to touch on here in terms of personal budgeting. Mint.com is one of the websites that I referenced earlier. I didn't give the name of it. It's a freebie. They also have a premium version, I believe. But it's pretty straightforward. You go in, you put all your categories in, you see where you're at. It's easy to track. I believe they make their money by having advertisements sent to you, so be aware of that if it's worth doing the premium. I'm just thinking, no, it's not. I'm trying to save money in the first place. I'll read a couple of ads. The second method, if you've not seen this, heard of it, tried it, it is a slam dunk. Suzanne and I don't do this so much anymore, but we did it a lot when we first got married. You basically take all of your optional categories. So you wouldn't do it with taxes, you wouldn't do it with rent, because that's an automatic amount. But for any optional category, so eating out, entertainment, clothing, things that you have a choice. It's not like, oh my gosh, I've got to make that payment. It's a choice aspect. You put that into an envelope. And when that's empty, for example, your entertainment, when that entertainment envelope is empty for the month, then guess what? You're reading books the rest of the month, or you're watching TV or whatever. It's a very simple, well, two things. It drives it home, because when the envelope's empty, it's empty. You can't just pull out your credit card, and if you have a tendency to do that, then let's start cutting up those credit cards. But it also is so short-term that it makes it relatively easy. If you set an annual budget and you say, I'm just going to pick a number out of the sky here. Let's say you're going to spend $100 a month on entertainment. Okay. Well, annually that'd be $1,200. So that's a lot, right? Monthly it's 100. So if we hit that 100 2.5 weeks into the month, it's not that hard to literally read books, watch TV, spend time playing cards, actual fun stuff that doesn't require money for another week and a half. And then you get to reset. The year-long thing, it's too easy to get way behind. So the envelope method is focused on a monthly, picking those categories, putting that money in cash. When it's empty, you're done. You're done with that category. Just till the end of the month. Then you get to reset. All right, so very, very powerful tool. If you're not doing that now and money is an issue, I would encourage that. The last note on this page, the 5 people you spend the most time with. One of the books I'll reference a little bit later is The Millionaire Next Door. Fascinating book. Not a new book, probably 15, 16 years old. Really interesting, though. This guy went and interviewed millionaires and asked them about their lives. And what he found is the person you think is a millionaire probably isn't. They're probably living on debt, month to month, paycheck to paycheck, trying to put up a show. And the person that you say, oh no, there's no way. Yeah, they probably are. One of the other points that comes not only out of that book, but out of book after book after book, and my kids are sick of hearing me say this, but you become the 5 people you spend the most time with. And we know that's true for wellness. It's been shown over and over and over that you can probably take the average BMI of the people you eat lunch with every day, and that's probably you. You can probably take the average. I mean, you just go down the list. It's education, it's exercise levels, it's BMI, it's vacation patterns, it's how often you eat out. It's all of these things. You become the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's part of the reason we're doing the cohorts, to give you time not only with a person facilitating it, but other people who are doing what you're doing, so you can help build on this. But in your personal life, you will become the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you're hanging around a bunch of people that want to drive new cars, are going on the fancy vacations, have to have the newest clothes, guess what? You're going to become those people. Now, it doesn't mean fire your friends, but think about, are these the people I want to become? Because you will, and that's going to have a huge impact on your finances. Okay? All right. So you're sitting there saying, okay, I'm actually in debt, and I was planning on starting this business, and are you saying I shouldn't now? And no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying get after it. Go make it happen. You're this far. We're in session 9. You're all over it. But what I'm saying is, in the process, let's attack this debt. And as I mentioned, Dave Ramsey, if you're not familiar with his Financial Peace University, he's got a radio show. It's in most major cities. A lot of resources online. Strongly encourage that. Good organization. He has this strategy that when I first read it, I thought, what? That doesn't make any sense. That's kind of contrary to everything I've ever read. His point was, you didn't get into debt because of logic. You don't sit here saying, well, logically speaking, I think I want to spend 18% more on every single item I buy, so let me use a credit card and not pay it off every month. That's not logical. We don't get into debt because of logic. We get into debt because of emotions or feelings or pressure or keeping up with the Joneses, etc. So don't depend on logic to get you out of debt. We need a system that functions outside of it and involves those emotions, those feelings, etc. So the snowball strategy is it's pretty cool, and it works. It really works. I've seen this over and over and over and over. But here's how it works. Take every debt that you've got. You can include your home. You cannot. Your call on that one. Again, a lot of discussion around interest rates and the fact that it's tax deductible and that kind of thing. It wouldn't hurt to include that. We've kind of walked the fence on that and gone part way. But write down every single debt you have. List them from smallest debt to largest debt, and that's in terms of total amount. Don't worry about the percentage. Again, logic says pay off the one that's the highest percentage first. Logic didn't get into this. Logic ain't going to get you out of it. So he says, forget the percentage. List it in total amount. What do I owe? Smallest debt to largest debt. And then pay the minimum on everything except the smallest. And make that smallest one the focus of your life. You know, I don't totally mean that, but you know what I'm saying? In terms of your finances, every time you think, should I go out to eat? No, let's devote another $15 to that one I'm trying to pay off. So you're paying the minimum on everything except for the smallest one, and you are completely focused on eliminating that smallest one. Now, it's not going to take long to pay off that smallest one if you're totally focused on it. So now you can take everything you're putting towards the smallest one, plus the minimum you're putting towards the next smallest one, plus anything else that you can come up with to pay off the next smallest one. And you continue that process until it's eliminated. And it works. And what it does is it creates this momentum. We love momentum. It's powerful. It's not just a sporting thing. It's a life thing. When you get momentum, and you'll see this with your business, as you start to get your first client, your second client, your third client, you get this momentum going. It builds on itself, and the same thing happens here. All right. So in terms of our revenue stream, one of the things I want to emphasize to you is you're out there starting to build your business and thinking through, how much money you need to make each month to make things happen and pay for your mortgage and the fact that you're growing this business. I've got the word revenue there in quotes. The reason I did that is it's not really revenue, it's cost savings. But did you realize, I'm sure you did, but let me bring it to your attention, did you realize that for every dollar you save, it's actually like earning $1.30, depending on your tax rate. When you take Social Security, state tax, local tax, federal tax, when you earn $1, you don't really earn $1, you earn what, 70, 68 cents, something like that. When you save $1, you save $1. So it's 30% more. Actually, slightly more than that. So this, if we can create, as you're in the early stages of your business, money's going to be tight. Again, unless you're some trust fund kid and you're sitting out there going, oh, this is just for fun. Great, congratulations. Doesn't apply to the rest of us. But if we can create this revenue, in quotes, revenue stream by saving money in some different areas, it's like earning more money with our business. So let's look at a few of these. I mentioned The Millionaire Next Door. Take a look at that one. It's a good one. The It's Only syndrome. Starbucks is I was going to say a $1 trillion company. It's not actually a $1 trillion company, but it's a really successful multi-billion-dollar company. And they thrive on a number of different things that they do very, very well. But one of them is the It's Only syndrome. I mean, really, how bad is it just to have a cup of coffee a day? I enjoy it. It's my thing. And there's nothing wrong with it if you have plenty of money. But if you're trying to save money, that's $1,000 a year. Just having coffee 5 days a week. Could you make that a once-a-week special treat or something? So that's $1,000 a year, which, as we said, isn't really $1,000. It's more like $1,300 a year. Makes a difference. Is something a nice to have or a need to have? When Susanna and I were first married, I think we'd been married for 2 years, a little over 2.5 years, I think, because Ashley had just been born a few months prior. A young lady by the name of April, my wife had met through some counseling she'd done at the Colorado Springs Pregnancy Center, came to stay with us as she was getting ready to have her baby. And it was, we're still friends with April. It's been, how long has it been? Oh my gosh, 20 years. She was 18 at the time. Yeah, she's 38 now. And it was a great experience for us, and I hope for April. But it's really funny because I still remember this conversation. Susanna was working as an occupational therapist. I was working as a physical therapist. We both had graduate degrees. We're living in a small house. And April could not believe that we didn't have cable. She's just like, you guys both work. You both have good jobs. Why don't you have cable? And by the way, don't feel too sorry for us. We do now have satellite, not cable, but same idea. But at the time, we went many years just, let's watch the basic channels because we want to have kids and we want to try to help them with college, and there's a lot of other expenses along the way. But she just couldn't believe it. She grew up where they had essentially no money, living on welfare, but they found a way to get cable. And it was, for her, it seemed like a need to have. For us, love to, but don't really need it right now. So it's a lot of perspective. Now, going beyond the concept of coffee, coffee is an easy one to pick on because it's such a regular habit. But just look at the other things around you. And this is where the budgeting is so valuable. Eating out. It seems like it's not much, not that big a deal. I saw a stat the other day. We now spend more at restaurants than we do in the grocery stores. Wow. It adds up. And it's not just you might look at it and go, well, if I go to such and such a place, it's only like $8. Yeah, but if you go for dinner, do you get a drink? There's another 5. Do you get a dessert? Do you get, you got the tip involved, you got the taxes involved. Eating out's a lot of fun. We love it. But it's a lot of money. It's crazy. A cell phone. Do you need the latest, greatest? Need. Remember, this is, if you got plenty of money, questions off the table. But as you're growing your business, the more you, for every dollar you save, you're able to build your business more. That ought to be huge motivation. I've got Danielle's name. She's our middle daughter, and she's the one we want running our finances when we get old, because she watches every penny. And what we did with the kids as they were growing up is we said, don't pay for your cell phone for safety reasons, but if you want the super duper data plans or whatever, you get to cover that. And she thought it through and said, you know what, I can borrow my brother or sister's phone if I want to look something up, or go to the computer. I'll just take the basic. And so she got that extra money that, frankly, it adds up. And those little things make a big difference. Mentioned cable before. Automobile. Do you get super excited when you hit 200,000 miles in your car? 250,000 miles? I mean, it's like party time, right? I do. And I'm kind of strange, but oh man, we've never bought a new car, and we've never gone under 200,000 miles. It's just who we are, and maybe someday we won't have to have that pattern, but it's just who we are. I strongly encourage it. That adds up immensely. And if you can avoid payments on that, I know, oh yeah, I can afford that on a monthly basis. Yeah, but do you need to? Home. If you can stay 5 more years in your house, 7 more years in your house, one of the things that came out of the Millionaire Next Door is they usually live in their homes for 30 years. They don't move very often. You lose $10,000 in agent costs alone on a $200,000 home move. Groceries, discounts or coupons almost always. Contrarian living, going to lunch instead of dinner. Prices are lower, but you'll also won't be likely to buy a super drink. Buying Valentine's Day flowers at the last minute pretty much doubles your price. Get them early. Track it. The whole idea of a budget. What gets tracked gets done. And then make it a contest with your family, your spouse, your friends, those 5 people you spend the most time with. Commit to it as a team, and it's much, much easier. Much, much easier. One other note, because I just wrote a blog post on this, your vacation choices. Vacations are awesome and critical, but if you can set a pattern, for the last, I added it up actually, we've done 48 drives from Colorado to Little Rock over the last 24 years. Twice a year, every year. That's where we go every summer to see family. That's where we go every Christmas to see family. I added up the dollars we save, and we drive. I think we flew once. I think we flew once when it was just before the kids were born, actually. Now I'm thinking about it. We flew once. Susanna needed to be in and out of there a little quicker. The baby was on the way relatively soon, so we popped in a plane. But the other 47 times, it's been a drive. And people look at us and go, really? You have a 21-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 16-year-old, and you guys pack into a car that's max supposed to sit 5 people? Yeah, and the money has added up to enough to pay for 2 of the kids' college expenses. So these things add up. It's just like in wellness, it's the things that you do on a daily basis over and over and over and over that will have the big impact. All right, let's talk this through in terms of this idea of multiple streams of income. This is kind of what you're getting into now with your business. The typical person has the day job, which is essentially all of their money, and maybe they've got a tiny bit in investments. And then if they start their coaching business, they've got this little sliver. Your goal over time is this second diagram. where you've got your day job, maybe you're able to peel. Maybe you don't ever stop that day job. Maybe you already have. Maybe you're rolling, and this business academy is to take you up, a couple levels. But let's say that you're just out of the gate. You've got a full-time or a very part-time, 25, 30-hour a week part-time job, and this is your coaching business as your extension. Well, the goal is to grow that over time. So when you see yourself as the CEO of You Incorporated, and you don't just say, well, this is my coaching business. No, it's You Incorporated. It's how much are you making as a whole. Well, the more we put into investments, that's like a business. The more we can grow our coaching business, that's a business. Our day job, that's a business. These are different streams of income that add up to the whole. And the more effective you are at laying these out, the more choices you're going to have long term. So just to give you an example of this, if you are the CEO of You Incorporated, and that's a concept I first heard from Tom Peters, love it. So again, you're not the CEO of your wellness coaching business. You're the CEO of all of your streams of income. What are those? Well, monthly client members. So let's say you have 20 people that are monthly, they pay a monthly fee and they get the standard stuff and they work really well and you know that money's coming in. And you have your premium clients, or you have additional coaching where you charge a little extra for an additional coaching session each month, and we'll get into that a little bit. But that's another stream. Maybe you have one company you work with. It's got 67 employees, and you structure that one a little bit differently, but that's a monthly revenue that you get, and we'll be talking about how to price those kinds of things out, in the session 10, by the way. Maybe you do some teaching, local school, college. Maybe you do some speaking at different conferences. You make a little money with that. If you have your part-time job, it provides a little bit of money. If you've got your investments, it provides a little bit of money. These are the composites. You're looking at the pie chart as a whole. And I want you to really think that through and what that could look like for you. And is there another bullet point that maybe you could add to this? All right. Let's talk through, let me pop all four up here. Let's talk through some of the basic numbers that you really need to understand, and then we'll get into some bootstrapping, and I'll wrap this up. The upfront investments, that's pretty important for you to understand because people tend to make a few too many of these. Or if you look at the mix of fixed expenses and upfront investments, it can throw people off. Upfront investment, that's what you spend before you can even get started. So your coaching certification, obvious one. Everyone's got to do that. You're done with that. Most of you are done with that. And that's just what it is. You got to get in the door. You got to have that one. So that's an upfront investment. Maybe it's some piece of equipment that you're not leasing, you're actually buying. Fixed expenses, on the other hand, are those things that, well, the name comes from the fact that they're fixed every month. It doesn't matter how many clients you have. You can have one client or you can have 50 clients. Your fixed expenses don't change. The most obvious example of this is rent. If you're renting space from somebody for your coaching business, then that's a fixed expense. Now, technically, not truly fixed over time because when you get a certain size, you've got to add space. But for our purposes here, fixed expenses stay constant, regardless of how many clients you have. But on a per client basis, they go down as your number of clients go up. So if you have 100 clients, you're paying $1,000 a month in your rent, then you're spending $10 per client per month for that rent. If you have one client, you're spending $1,000 a month per client. So on a per client basis, they go down as your clients go up. Variable expenses are the exact opposite. Variable expenses, they are relatively, this is not totally true, but for our purposes here, relatively constant on a per client basis. A good example might be the way we've priced out the Wellness Nation portal. You just pay $5 a month per client. It's just a flat fee. It doesn't increase when you have 20 clients or decrease when you hit 16 clients. The exception to that is once you get up over 100 clients, it drops pretty dramatically. But it'll be a little while before you're there, most likely, unless you've got a company you hook up with. So variable expenses, they vary based on your number of clients. They go up as a gross number. They stay constant on a per client basis. And then marginal income, real important to understand this, because marginal income is all about how much you make on the next client. You may, actually it wouldn't be a bad thing. If you could break even or be in that neighborhood after your first 10 clients, that's not a bad thing. And then your profits on client 11, 12, 13, 14. So quick example. Let's say that you do, with all your different expenses built in, you do break even at the 10 mark. But at 11, the only additional expense you have is, again, if you're using that Wellness Nation portal, $5. So if you're breaking even, and we'll go through pricing in the next session, but let's just say, for example, today you're charging $50 a month. Well, you're breaking even on your first 10, but on number 11, you're making $45 a month on that person, because your only expense, only variable expense, is that portal cost. So your marginal income, what you're making on the next client, not your average, but what you're making on the next client, is the marginal income. And that's the number you really want to focus on as you're a growing business. Okay, bootstrapping. As you get started, a few concepts to keep in mind in terms of this idea of bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is the idea of, hey, we're just going to pull on our boots and we're going to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps and move forward. And you need to do some of that when you first start your business. So as you're analyzing costs, as you're looking at expenses, think about how many clients will this cost me? So I would really like a new laptop. Great, but how many clients is it going to cost you for that new laptop? Now, if you have 500 clients, it's not costing you much per client for that new laptop. So maybe it's worth doing. But if you have 7 clients, you're eating up several months worth of clients to get that laptop. Can we get by without it? So ask yourself that question regularly. Secondly, the balance between save money and reflection on the business. And this really ties into the fourth one there, too, of the key perspectives. So I'll combine these for you today. Yes, we want to save money, but you can't shrink your way to greatness. We've got to spend money on smart things. And for us, the URAC accreditation, I hope, turns out to be one of those things. When we first, I think we were less than 2 years old, we decided to go ahead and pursue the URAC accreditation. It was far more than we could afford, but it put us in a category of providers that was completely different than most of our competition. As I'm doing this now, we're the only URAC approved provider that's based in the state of Colorado. So key perspective. Watch your dollars, but don't jump over, what's the old saying, don't jump over dimes, don't jump over dollars to pick up dimes. We want to make sure what is the reflection on our business. And then the last note here is, have I done my part before trying to buy results? It's very easy when someone knocks on your door, that means they call you or send you an email probably, with this great marketing idea, this great advertising opportunity. And it's much easier to write a check than to do the work that we need to do as you think back of what we went through in the sales and marketing section. Have you done your part before you try to buy some sort of result? So a few other comments on there, and I'll just pop all these up here. What can be delegated for less than your job size? So if you're currently working a part-time job, there are certain things for your business that you can outsource cheaper than you can spend your own time doing it. Maybe social media is one of those. Maybe designing your advertising materials. Maybe your portal upkeep, your electronic scheduling. Those kind of electronic scheduling is actually a great example. That cost saves you X amount of minutes/hours every week. Taxes. Yeah, maybe if yours are basic, you can do them yourself. At some point, we went to a bookkeeper relatively soon to make sure that we were getting guidance on business expenses also, because one of the areas you can save money as a small business owner, and I'm not an accountant telling you this, I'm saying ask an accountant about these options, but you may very well be able to write off a portion or all of your cell phone, for example, or your internet service, for example, so part of your car possibly. So some of those things that you may be able to save money on because you're a small business owner might make up for a lot of the expenses you're making initially. We talked about needs versus wants, home office versus lease. Be careful with that. With bank fees, ask. Don't just jump into a bank. What does it cost me for checks? What does it cost me for these things? We still, I probably shouldn't admit this to you, but I still handwrite many of our checks that we send out for our other company, ArrowBar Edge, because there's no reason for us to be paying a fee on those checks every month. That's a little bit different for U.S. Corporate Wellness. Credit cards, 12 to 18%. Don't use them. If you can avoid them, don't use them. And then your bookkeeping system. You know, we talked about QuickBooks earlier when we were going through the system section. Can be very valuable. Maybe you don't need it right out of the gate. Okay? And then time, most valuable resource. Make sure every moment matters. So let's wrap this up. I'm looking at the clock. I'm going to go slightly over 45 minutes on this one. And then next one, we're going to get into the company components of the finances. So your homework is just one. But get your personal financial house in order. Doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be debt-free before watching number 10, but get the plan moving. Set things in motion so you're ready to be successful going forward. So with that, we've got 2 left, 1 more on finances, 1 more that's going to be more of an all-encompassing. In Part B of financing, we're going to look at identifying your rates, how to package those things, what contracts look like, and a basic budget and how you can work with that. So take care of that homework, get your financial house in order. I'll see you at the next one.